This episode of the Shadow Parliament will discuss something that is very controversial here in America, something that people can be firmly against when it is spoken and others have no problem with it. The notion of empire, the theory of empire, but not the British, but an American empire. Don't think this is a bunch of insane rambling, but be sure to listen. Let me make my case. When it's all done, you make up your own mind. So let's start. The notion of an American empire was first said after the Spanish-American War of 1898, when the United States went to war with Spain and defeated the Spanish and gained control of the Philippines, Cuba, Guam, and Puerto Rico. Now that we all know where this phrase was first coined, let's discuss the issue in more detail. Here's what one of the founding fathers of our nation had to say. Thomas Jefferson. For those of you who do not know who this man is, here's a quick biography. Thomas Jefferson was the third president of the United States from 1801 through 1809, the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, and, for his promotion of the ideals of republicanism in the United States, one of the most influential founding fathers. Jefferson envisioned America as the force behind a great quote-unquote empire of liberty that would promote republicanism and counter the imperialism of the British Empire. Jefferson used this phrase, Empire of Liberty, in 1780 while the American Revolution was still being fought. His goal was an empire dedicated to liberty that could stop the growth of the British Empire, which he hated and feared. Quote, "We shall divert through our own country a branch of commerce which the European states have thought worthy of the most important struggles and sacrifices, and in the event of peace, hence ending the American Revolution, we shall form to the American Union a barrier against the dangerous extension of the British province of Canada, and add to the Empire of Liberty an extensive and fertile country, thereby converting dangerous enemies into valuable friends." End quote. Jefferson to George Rogers Clark, the 25th of December, 1780. In 1809, Jefferson wrote his successor, James Madison, quote, "We should then have only to include the North, Canada, in our confederacy, and we should have such an empire for liberty as she has never surveyed since the creation. And I am persuaded no constitution was ever before so well calculated as ours for extensive empire and self-government." End quote. Jefferson to James Madison, 27th of April, 1809. That's right, an empire of liberty. An empire of liberty. Some may think that this is crazy. It counters what the Constitution is. But before you think of that, think of this. At the time the United States was a new nation clinging to the eastern coast of the North American continent, the French termed British colonies above our nation, and the Spanish Empire to the south. In a way, we needed to say and act like this in order to survive. After we declared independence, we had nothing. No army, no navy, no trade, no national reputation, no currency, no nothing. England, the mother country, had provided everything for us, and now we had to do things for ourselves. As we moved on to one of the first instances of when the United States was considered a growing empire, the Louisiana Purchase. The Purchase was a vital moment in the presidency of Thomas Jefferson. At the time, it faced domestic opposition as being possibly unconstitutional. Although he felt that the U.S. Constitution did not contain any provisions for acquiring territory, Jefferson decided to purchase Louisiana because he felt uneasy about France and Spain having the power to block American trade access to the port of New Orleans. Napoleon Bonaparte, upon completion of the agreement, stated, quote, "The secession of territory affirms forever the power of the United States, and I have given England a maritime rival who sooner or later will humble her pride." End quote. But the House of Representatives did not favor the deal and actually voted to block the purchase, but it failed by just 2 votes. Jefferson disliked the idea of purchasing Louisiana from France, as that could imply that France had a right to be in Louisiana. Jefferson believed that a U.S. president did not have the authority to make such a deal. It was not accurately mentioned in the Constitution itself. But in the end, the purchase was approved, and the size of the United States of America was effectively doubled, literally with the stroke of a pen. This would be an instant where we bought land that some say the circumstances was not exactly credible. There would be few times in our nation's history where we would do it again. Instead, we would simply take it through war and annexation. I think the best example of this is the Mexican-American War. In Mexico, this war is actually called the American Invasion of Mexico in some cases. Territorial expansion of the United States on the Pacific coast was foremost in the minds of President James K. Polk and his associates in their whole conduct of the war. The major consequence of the war was the Mexican cession of the territories of Alta California and Santa Fe de Nuevo Mexico to the United States under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. In addition, Mexico accepted the Rio Grande as a national border and the loss of Texas. Here in America, we knew that the western region of the North American continent was extremely valuable and would give our nation access to two oceans. Added to that, the region of California would be part of the Union. This region was so important that the British was worried that if the western portion of the continent would fall under American possession, that the USA would become a true power to contend with. We knew two factors of Mexico at the time. The first was that the northern regions of the country were sparsely populated. Second, the factor that Mexico was a very fragile nation, then as it is now. Using this to our advantage, we went to war with Mexico and soundly defeated that nation. Our forces even occupied the capital, Mexico City. Mexico was forced to relinquish sovereignty over California and Texas. If the size of these lands are taken into account, Mexico lost 55% of its original territory. With the success of the war, there was even some who argued that all of Mexico should be annexed into the Union, but there was some stiff resistance to this idea, mostly due to the fact that American citizenship would be given to non-European peoples, and that the Mexicans was a non-English speaking people. It was an issue of racism basically, so in the end we settled for California and Texas. Even to this day, some Mexicans are still a bit sour over the whole conflict. After that, the United States of America stretched from ocean to ocean, but we still had one final land dispute on the North American continent. North of California, there was a northern region that was in dispute by our nation as well as the British and Canadians. Canada formed partly as a response to American expansion, even out of fear in some cases, but that's for another episode, American-Canadian relations. Be sure to view that video also. We were all arguing over who would get the most land. The British and Canadians wanted the land all the way down to the former Mexican border, while we wanted all the land up to the border with the Russian America. Some of us even wanted to go to war with Britain again, for the third time. The first being the Revolution, the second being the War of 1812, and this would possibly be the third time. The phrase 54 or fight, referring to the northern border of the region and often attributed to James K. Polk's campaign. The goal of the slogan was to rally Southern expansionists, some of whom wanted to only annex Texas in an effort to tip the balance of slave-free states and territories in favor of slavery, to support the effort to annex Oregon country, appealing to the popular belief of manifest destiny. The British government, meanwhile, sought control of all territory north of the Columbia River. Despite the threats, no one wanted to fight what would have been the third war in 70 years against the other. There was another reason why we abandoned the extreme claim. We just went to war with Mexico and annexed its northern regions, and our army was, well, a bit tired. We would all come to a peaceful agreement in the 1846 Oregon Treaty that divided the territory of the Continental Divide along the 49th parallel to the Georgia Strait, with all of Vancouver Island remaining under British control. This border still divides British Columbia from neighboring Washington, Idaho, and Montana, even though some argued as to why the British took control of all of Vancouver Island. I remember reading once that the island should have been split as well, but in the end we lost it, as the Canadians would later take it. Just for a visual reference, this is what the western coast of the United States will look like if we got the extreme claim as well as the Mexican land. Imagine, the southernmost city on the west coast would basically be San Francisco, and the northernmost city would basically be Prince Rupert.